Of all the elements on Earth, few are as well-known, dangerous, and widespread as arsenic. Despite earning the notorious title of the King of Poisons, it often does not receive the recognition it truly deserves. Throughout history, arsenic has left a devastating mark, claiming the lives of kings, emperors, political rivals, and countless others unfortunate enough to encounter it. In this exploration, we're going to examine some of the most notable leaders who met their ends through arsenic poisoning, whether by a secretive, malicious plot or through their own misjudgments. But first, what's arsenic? Well, arsenic is a common semi-metallic element found in Earth's crust. It exists in soil, water, even in the air around you, although it is most frequently encountered in minerals such as orpiment, rhyolgar, and arsenopyrite. Officially recognized in 1250 by Albertus Magnus, arsenic's presence in these minerals reveals a history that is much older than its recorded discovery. Orpiment was used as far back as the Paleolithic times for its vibrant red pigmentation, and it continued to be valued for thousands of years. The Egyptians and Akkadians incorporated the mineral into paintings and cosmetics, with some orpiment even buried with King Tutankhamun. In fact, its use was so widespread in the ancient world that the term arsenic is believed to have derived from the Greek word for arsenikon, meaning yellow orpiment. The application of arsenic-containing minerals did not end with ancient civilizations. During the Victorian era, arsenic appeared in everything from wallpaper to beauty products, and today it continues to be used across various industries, often as an alloying agent. Unfortunately, arsenic is also one of the deadliest toxins known to man, capable of causing harm in a whole lot of ways. Acute exposure, with symptoms appearing in as little as 30 minutes, can lead to stomach pain, vomiting, diarrhea, fluid in the lungs, and even brain damage. Chronic exposure, on the other hand, may result in heart conditions, skin lesions, and several different types of cancer. Now, given humanity's long history of living close to arsenic, it is hardly surprising that modern researchers have begun investigating famous historical deaths for potential arsenic poisoning. Arsenic poisoning can produce a wide range of symptoms and may easily be mistaken for illnesses like food poisoning or dysentery. Consequently, several historical leaders are now suspected of having fallen victim to the deadly toxin. Pontus was a Hellenistic kingdom located on the southern coast of the Black Sea in what is today Turkey, even though it was founded by the Persians in the 4th century BC. In its early years, the Mithridatic kings forged an alliance with Rome, a practice that Mithridates V continued by sending ships and auxiliary forces to support Rome during the Third Punic War. Furthermore, he expanded his kingdom into central Anatolia through conquest, establishing himself as a well-rounded ruler over his 30-year reign. In 120 BC, Mithridates V met a tragic end when he was poisoned at a banquet in Sinop, a city in northern Turkey. Although neither the identity of the poisoner nor the method used was ever officially revealed, subsequent events shed light on the chaos that ensued. After his death, the kingdom of Pontus passed to his widow, Laodice, who was expected to rule alongside their underage son, Mithridates VI, until he came of age. However, matters quickly took an unexpected turn. Laodice turned against her son and made several attempts on his life, using methods that likely included arsenic poisoning. Upon uncovering his mother's plot, Mithridates VI fled and reportedly spent several years living in the wilderness. When he eventually returned, he emulated his mother's earlier tactic by using arsenic to poison those at court who had conspired against him, ultimately reclaiming his throne. Notably, he chose to spare his mother from poisoning, instead sentencing her to life imprisonment. Mithridates VI spent his reign undoing his father's legacy by waging 3 wars against Rome. Known as the Mithridatic Wars, these conflicts occurred between 88 BC and 63 BC and ultimately sealed the fate of the Pontic kingdom. After his final defeat by Pompey the Great, Mithridates VI attempted to end his life with poison. However, years of microdosing on arsenic and other toxins, perhaps a habit from his early years, had built up a tolerance that rendered his suicide attempt ineffective. In the end, his guard was forced to end his life, putting a final stop to the Poison King. The story of Mark Antony and Cleopatra's demise is as renowned as that of Romeo and Juliet. Following their defeat by Octavian, the future Roman emperor, in 30 BC, Cleopatra sought refuge within a mausoleum. Antony, misled by misinformation and convinced that Cleopatra was already dead, chose to throw himself on his own sword in despair. After burying her fallen love, Cleopatra took her own life in a way that has become legendary, by allowing an asp, a venomous snake that also symbolized divine royalty, to bite her. However, this is merely a romanticized version of events that overlooks some crucial aspects of Cleopatra herself. While she is often remembered for her beauty and romantic entanglements, she was, in fact, one of the most intelligent rulers of the ancient world. A dedicated scholar, Cleopatra invested considerable time and effort in studying medicine and toxins. Throughout her lifetime, she reportedly developed treatments ranging from a cure for baldness to salves for contusions, as well as a recipe for skin brightening, among other innovations. Her expertise in these fields was so remarkable that modern scholars even believe she authored multiple books on cosmetics and toxicology. On a darker note, it is believed that Cleopatra devoted a significant amount of time to experimenting with poisons, even conducting regular tests on prisoners. She investigated the effects of snake venom, various plants, and most notably, arsenic, along with other toxins. Given her extensive knowledge of poisons, ending her life with a snakebite would seem like an odd choice, particularly when she was aware of at least a dozen less painful methods. While some historians speculate that Cleopatra might have used a mixture of opium, hemlock, and wolfsbane, it is just as likely that she chose arsenic, an abundant mineral in ancient Egypt with which she was highly familiar. Roman Emperor Nero is often regarded as one of history's greatest villains, infamous for allegedly playing the lyre while Rome burned, and for a host of other scandalous and indecent behaviors. While historians have long debated the truth versus the embellishments surrounding Nero, far fewer have examined the reputation of his mother, Julia Agrippina. Also known as Agrippina the Younger, Nero's mother was a powerful and highly ambitious figure in her own right. As the great-granddaughter of the first emperor, Augustus, the daughter of Emperor Tiberius's heir apparent, and the sister of Emperor Caligula, Agrippina appeared destined for greatness. When nepotism did not open the doors she desired, she was more than willing to resort to manipulation, even to poison, to achieve her goals. After marrying Emperor Claudius in 49 AD, Agrippina made sure her new husband adopted her son Nero as his own. This move came despite the fact that Claudius already had a biological son and heir, Britannicus, who was only slightly younger than Nero, thereby complicating the line of succession. To secure her son's position, Agrippina began to plot to remove Claudius from power. In 54 AD, the emperor died under suspicious circumstances, reportedly after his wife fed him poisoned mushrooms. Although the poison has never been definitively identified as arsenic, the symptoms leading up to his death, including stomach distress and diarrhea, along with the events that followed, suggest a troubling conclusion. On the day before Britannicus' 14th birthday in 55 AD, the young prince was poisoned at a banquet. In a move reminiscent of his mother's tactics, it is believed that Nero, viewing his younger stepbrother as a threat, removed him using a white arsenic powder likely slipped into Britannicus' dinner. While Agrippina's involvement in his death has been debated, it is clear that by this point, poisoning had become something of a family tradition. The 15th century Kievan Rus was very different from Russia of today. Instead of a single centralized government, the land was divided into several principalities, one of the largest being the Grand Duchy of Moscow, or Muscovy. In Muscovy, the Grand Prince ruled according to a tradition where succession passed from older brother to younger, rather than the more common father-to-son method. However, in 1425, the principality was thrown into turmoil when Grand Prince Vasily died and named his eldest son, Vasily II, as his successor, a decision that led his brother, Yuri, to take up arms in pursuit of what he believed was his birthright. Alongside Yuri were his sons, including Dmitri Shamyaka. Over the next 28 years, father and sons waged war against their own family for control of the principality. Yuri ultimately gained control in Moscow in 1433, but he died the following year. With his death, Vasily II regained power, leaving Dmitri to challenge his cousin for control. After a period of uneasy alliance between the two, Vasily was captured by Tatar forces during an unrelated conflict. Dmitri seized the opportunity by capturing Moscow and naming himself Grand Prince. When the Tatars released Vasily into Dmitri's custody, Dmitri had his cousin blinded. However, lacking support from the Muscovites, Dmitri was soon driven out of the city, and rule returned to Vasily. Unwilling to give up on his ambitions, Dmitri continued plotting against Vasily. Eventually, however, he was forced to retreat and take refuge in Novgorod. There, on July 17, 1453, Dmitri Shamyaka met his end. Vasily's supporters had bribed Dmitri's cook to poison his chicken dinner with arsenic, and Dmitri suffered for 12 agonizing days before finally succumbing to its effects. It is said that Vasily II was so pleased by the news of his cousin's death that he ennobled the messenger who brought him the tidings. During the Italian Renaissance, the Borgia family emerged as one of the most powerful and feared names of the era. Born in 1431 in Valencia, Spain, Rodrigo Borgia rose to prominence in Italy, steadily climbing the ranks of the Catholic Church through a combination of wealth, nepotism, and allegedly poisoning. Thanks to his uncle, Pope Calixtus III, Rodrigo was appointed cardinal and later became the vice-chancellor of the church. These influential positions allowed him to amass considerable personal wealth and establish himself as a true Renaissance prince and patron of the arts. In addition to his political and religious influence, he fathered 4 illegitimate children, including Lucrezia and Caesar. In 1492, Rodrigo's ambitions culminated when he was elected pope, adopting the name Alexander VI. It is said that during his time as pope, Alexander VI and his children, particularly Lucrezia and Caesar, developed an arsenic-based poison known as cantarella. Allegedly a white powder with a pleasant taste, it became the Borgia's tool of choice in the ensuing years. As Pope Alexander VI is believed to have poisoned at least 5 cardinals by sprinkling cantarella into their food at dinner parties, subsequently claiming their wealth and property for himself. His son, Caesar, who was appointed a cardinal and later captain general of the papal army, is thought to have assisted in these endeavors. Meanwhile, Lucrezia is said to have concealed cantarella in a hollow ring, which she would discreetly add to guests' drinks during dinner parties. However, many historians now question her involvement, attributing much of the narrative to slander from her rivals. Ironically, it appears that arsenic was likely responsible for the downfall of the devious pope. After attending a banquet in 1503, Pope Alexander VI and his son Caesar returned home to share a bottle of wine. Who poisoned the bottle, or how the poisoning was carried out, remains a mystery to this day. What is known, however, is that both father and son experienced stomach trouble similar to those afflicting their victims, pointing to arsenic as the likely culprit. Although Caesar eventually recovered, the poisoning ultimately proved fatal for Pope Alexander VI. Many leaders throughout history have been labeled as bad or tyrannical for various reasons, yet few have incited as much turmoil or generated as much hatred during their reign as King Erik XIV of Sweden. Even before ascending to the throne, Erik had acquired a reputation for stepping on toes, particularly those of his father, King Gustav. As a bachelor, the prince was obsessed with securing a marriage, becoming especially fixated on Queen Elizabeth I of England. Despite his father's disapproval of the match, Eric's efforts proved futile as Elizabeth repeatedly rejected him. His attempts to court her, and others, including her cousin Mary, Queen of Scots, merely served to annoy several influential figures. When King Gustav died in 1560, Eric was proclaimed king, and he immediately began alienating those around him. He curtailed the power of his 2 half-brothers, both of whom had been granted large duchies by King Gustav, thereby consolidating his own authority and imposing heavier military obligations on the nobility. When his brother John, the Duke of Finland, married a Polish princess against Eric's wishes, Eric responded by imprisoning both John and his bride for high treason, an act that enraged the Polish king. Simultaneously, Eric expanded Sweden's territory along the eastern Baltic coast by acquiring land in Estonia. This expansion provoked the anger of King Frederick II of Denmark and Norway, who in 1563 formed an alliance with Poland and declared war on Sweden, setting the stage for the 7 Years' War of the North. With what must have felt like the entire world against him, King Eric reportedly began to lose his sanity, growing increasingly paranoid and violent day by day. In 1567, he ordered the execution of 5 Swedish nobles that he suspected of conspiring against him. That same year, despite objections from the nobility, he had his commoner mistress crowned queen. Eventually, his people had had enough. In 1568, a group of nobles, assisted by Eric's own brothers, deposed the king and imprisoned him. After nearly a decade in captivity, King Erik XIV died in 1577. Although popular legend maintained that his final meal, a bowl of pea soup, had been poisoned, this tale was generally dismissed as mere myth. That is, until the 1950s, when the king's remains were exhumed and subjected to medical analysis. Surprisingly, the findings revealed that King Eric had indeed been poisoned with arsenic, confirming the long-standing legend. The turn of the 17th century was a turbulent time for Korea, characterized by constant warfare. At the close of the 16th century, the Joseon dynasty defended against Japanese forces during a 6-year period that included 2 separate invasions. Shortly thereafter, Korea found itself embroiled in nearly half a century of conflicts with and against the Chinese, a series of wars that included the Ming-Manchu War and resulted in a shift of power in China from the Ming to the Qing dynasty. During this period of external strife, Korea also experienced significant internal turmoil. The royal family struggled with power dynamics, facing betrayals and poisoning scandals, while fierce political factions threatened the stability of the nation and pushed it to the brink of civil war. In 1623, King Injo ascended to the throne after deposing his uncle, the former king, with the help of co-conspirators. However, his reign brought additional hardship to Korea, marked by inefficient government, costly wars, rebellions, and a deep economic recession. During the 1636 conflict with the Qing armies, Injo was compelled to surrender. His son, Crown Prince Soyon, volunteered both himself and his wife to serve as hostages in the Qing capital of Shenyang. Over the course of his 9-year captivity, the Crown Prince displayed considerably more diplomatic skill than his father. He acted as a mediator between Korea and the Qing government, successfully working to prevent further attacks on his homeland. In addition, he mastered the Mongolian language and played a role in the Qing conquest of the Western Front. Unfortunately for Soyon, King Injo rejected his actions as traitorous attempts to introduce foreign influences into Korea. When the Crown Prince returned in 1645, the king had him imprisoned. Not long after, Soyon was found dead, his body marked with ominous black spots, a clear indication of heavy arsenic poisoning. While the most obvious suspect appears to be the king, some have suggested that his mistress, Lady Jo, might have been responsible. During her time at court, Lady Jo had openly expressed disdain for the king's children. The following year, Soyon's wife, Crown Princess Minho, was also poisoned, though sources continue to debate whether the king or his mistress ordered her execution. To many Americans, King George III is often remembered as a mad tyrant who imposed unfair taxes on his colonies to cover war debts. In contrast, the English viewed him as an affable and capable monarch, as well as a dedicated family man who was a staunch patron of the sciences and arts, albeit with occasional bouts of madness. Historically, both perspectives hold true, although reports of his madness did not begin until King George was already 50 years old, nearly 30 years into his reign. In June of 1788, King George III, who had generally been in good health, fell seriously ill for the first time. In the following months, he suffered from severe stomach pains, rashes, constant cramps, and a decline in his mental state. Those around him noted that his movements grew almost violent, and one court member even claimed to have heard the king howling like a dog. Although, as monarch, he received the best medical care available at the time, the treatments included purging, bleeding, blistering, and even exposing him to freezing conditions during the winter. One doctor repeatedly bound the king in a straitjacket, insisting that strict restraint would help cure his condition. In early 1789, for reasons that remain unclear, the king began to recover. He then went an entire decade without another episode, though further episodes eventually returned. By 1804, he had endured 2 more episodes before experiencing another severe attack that left him significantly weakened from that point on. His final attack in 1810 left him mentally unstable for the rest of his life, and he passed away a decade later. Over the years, several plausible theories have emerged regarding the cause of King George's madness and eventual death. One popular theory proposes that he suffered from porphyria, a rare genetic condition whose symptoms can include seizures, abdominal pain, and drastic shifts in mental health. However, a 2005 study examining one of King George's hairs produced surprising results. Laboratory tests revealed that the king had endured severe arsenic poisoning, with 17 parts per million of the substance detected, more than 17 times the expected amount. A review of historical records uncovered that George's doctors had administered generous doses of a medicine containing arsenic. This evidence suggests that although the king may have initially suffered from another medical condition, the arsenic poisoning undoubtedly exacerbated his symptoms, ultimately contributing to his mental decline and downfall. When discussing historical figures, few are as well known or as influential as Napoleon Bonaparte. A brilliant military strategist, he ascended the ranks of the French army before crowning himself Emperor of France and launching a series of ambitious wars. After 15 years of relentless conflict, a coalition of British and Prussian forces finally defeated him at the Battle of Waterloo. This defeat led to his exile on the remote island of St. Helena, where he spent the remainder of his life in isolation. Accompanied by a small group of carefully chosen companions and monitored by a British officer, the once mighty emperor endured a long period of monotony. In his final years, he reportedly sank deeper into depression, with little more to occupy his time beyond reading, walking, and engaging socially with his friends. At the relatively young age of 51, the former emperor's health began to deteriorate. For several months, he struggled with constipation, recurring stomach pains, and increasing fatigue. Eventually, these symptoms intensified, giving way to uncontrollable hiccups, vomiting, and the appearance of blood clots before he ultimately died on May 5, 1821. An autopsy was performed following his death, and physicians concluded that he had succumbed to stomach cancer, aggravated by bleeding ulcers. For years, this diagnosis was accepted as the official cause of death, with only a few dissenting from this conclusion. That was until a 1961 Nature magazine article introduced an entirely new theory. The article detailed tests conducted on strands of Napoleon's hair, which revealed excessively high levels of arsenic. This discovery ignited a variety of theories about the arsenic source, ranging from intentional poisoning by his British captors to unintentional exposure from everyday items. The most prominent theory, however, proposes that he may have been poisoned through medicine, similar to the case of King George III. One fact remains clear. In 1995, the FBI conducted follow-up tests and confirmed that Napoleon did indeed have toxic levels of arsenic in his system at the time of his death. There's an old saying, behind every great man is a greater woman. Yet, throughout history, despite facing limitations, restrictions, and cultural backlash, some women have risen to seize power, proving themselves to be more Machiavellian than any man to ever wear a crown. One such woman was Qing Empress Cixi. An empress and later dowager empress, during the late 19th century and early 20th centuries, Cixi and her family confronted immense challenges. Amid the forces of westernization, the Opium Wars, the Boxer Rebellion, and more, only a strong leader could hope to guide China through such turbulent times. Unfortunately for the Qing dynasty, Cixi's husband, Emperor Xianfeng, was reportedly anything but strong. After a series of military losses and the devastation of the Old Summer Palace during the Second Opium War, Emperor Xianfeng is said to have sunk into a deep depression. Allegedly, he turned to drugs and alcohol before dying at the young age of 30. Some speculate that the empress, who had effectively been running the government, grew dissatisfied with her husband and poisoned him. Their 5-year-old son, Tongzhi, then ascended to the throne, though he spent the next 13 years under his mother's control, ruling only at her discretion. However, just 2 years after fully assuming power on his own, Emperor Tongzhi also died under mysterious circumstances at the age of 18. Likely intent on choosing an emperor who could serve her ambitions, Cixi turned to her 5-year-old nephew, Zaidian, who would later take the imperial name of Emperor Guangxu. Throughout his reign, it was clear that the Dowager Empress maintained control of China, carefully calculating every decision and whispering her guidance into his ear. Unfortunately for the emperor, Cixi eventually came to view him as disposable. In 1908, just a day before her own death, the otherwise healthy Guangxu emperor was found dead at the age of 37. Rumors once again swirled around the Dowager Empress's possible involvement in the death of yet another emperor, but concrete evidence remained elusive for the following century. But then, in 2008, a study was released with conclusive findings. Extensive testing of the Guangxu Emperor's hair and clothes over a 5-year period revealed that he had died from acute arsenic poisoning after receiving more than triple the fatal dose, making him yet another leader felled by the King of Poisons. Thank you for watching.